10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Liftoff, and the clock is starting.
The clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And with a feather in one hand and a hammer in the other, we drop right into episode 13 on the plane at Hadley.
Now, we really don't know what we're going to find on the lunar surface.
I am your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin, and with us our CMP, Command Module Pilot
Nostromo.
Coming up in our program today, we'll update you on our progress in the game.
We have your letters in the crew report.
We'll also do the latest Kerbal news in this week's mission briefing.
Another episode of As the Kerbin Turns.
And this week, but I digress, 43-year anniversary of the Apollo 15 mission. First question I'm going to ask, how are you feeling?
A lot better. I'm on the way out of it. I'm going to say I'm in the 90%.
Okay, because you weren't feeling so hot last week.
No. I was actually kind of surprised on listening to it after everything was done. I'm like, oh, I'm not too far off. But we would have recorded around Saturday,
right?
We would have had a different register. I was like, I seriously could have had a line in Star Wars that you wouldn't have understood. Yeah, it was bad.
Well, good. I'm glad you're feeling better. Honestly, I thought I went to a movie this weekend and there was this lady behind me. The whole movie was and I kept thinking, oh, if I walk out of here and not get sick.
Yeah, it's I've noticed it's kind of jumped around work.
Yeah.
A couple of people have had it, and I think a couple of people had it before me. So I'm not the plague bringer. I'm not one of the horsemen.
You're not typhoid nos.
Yeah, and I met some people that I haven't been around at all, and they had it, and so I was like, okay, this is just jumping around.
Okay. Okay.
What movie did you see?
The Big Lebowski. They're over the summer. They're re-releasing some classics.
Oh, like they show them in the theater?
Yeah. The week before, I saw Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and then last weekend it was The Big Lebowski, and I'd never actually seen that in the theater.
Yeah.
Did I ever tell you that the first time I saw The Big Lebowski back when it first came out, I didn't like it. I didn't find it funny.
Yeah,
there was somebody I was working with she had bought it on video cassette when it came out, and she said, "Oh, you got to watch it. This is just the greatest movie." And so when I sat down to watch The Big Lebowski, it was like, "What is this?" And that was, so I gave it back to her. Yeah, that was real good.
Yeah,
and I think it was 10 years later or whatever, I started reading how it had become a cult classic. And I thought, well, I'll give it another try. And it was like I loved it.
Yeah.
And that happens sometimes. Sometimes you see something and you don't like it, and then you go back and you like it. Sometimes you go back to it and you go, this is worse than I remember.
Yeah, you're like, really?
Yeah. But for some reason, the second time I watched it, it just clicked. And now I just watch it constantly.
Yeah.
And because it's so funny.
Yeah, I have a couple of movies that usually if I see something, it's one and done with most movies. But if I find a comedy I like, I will milk 8 views out of it, in a week before I'm like, oh, I got to see it again.
I heard somebody said one time to me a long time ago, they said that the best things you don't necessarily like the first time you're exposed to them.
Yeah.
They say that, a lot of times, like with popular music, if you like it the very first time you hear it, usually the thing about it that you like is the thing that you're going to get sick of.
Oh, yeah.
That one part is going to, you love it at first, and then after a while, that's the part that you hate the most, because it's so easily likable. Whereas the stuff that's really good sometimes requires you to view it or listen to it or read it more than once.
Yeah, I have a lot of albums that was the first time I bought it, I was like, oh man. And then later on I'd be listening to it and I was like, oh man, I just listened to it all week.
Yeah, you were telling me about that whole Carly Rae Jepsen thing.
Yeah,
You're a big fan of Call Me Maybe.
Yeah. I
was thinking about
crazy.
that. Do you know how? Just Call Me Maybe. Do you know how on the on the iPod it keeps track of it does the song count?
Oh,
the play count.
Yeah.
I always Stephen King had written an article, and he was saying that they had asked him what his favorite music was, and he was all ready to tell him well, this is what I listen to all the time, and then he looked at his iPod, and it was completely different stuff. And he was, well, I guess that's what I like. And, and I always thought, like if we got your iPod, it'd be like, we'd think it's Diarrhea Planet, and then we look at it and it's Called Me Maybe.
Actually, on Windows Media Player, they have a play count.
Right.
And most of my songs were in the, like highest in their hundreds or something.
Mm-hmm.
There was one album that was in its 500s because I was able to sleep to that album for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I'd leave it on. And then I think I left it on for an entire day because it was so low I didn't notice it. And so I was like, man, if anybody looks at this, they're going to think I'm a maniac. I'm obsessive about this.
Oh, I'm curious. What was the album?
It was Iron and Wine, which is...
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was, at the time, it was pretty easy to sleep to, but the moment you started to get to know it, then you'd be up because you're like, oh, here's that song.
Well, when you said that, my first thought, you were going to say something. It was like Barney's Sleepy Time album, or
oh, I thought you were going to kid over to like a death metal song or something. Like I just left the people banging pots and pans. Reminds me of home.
Yeah, no, it's just you said it's the album I sleep to, and I was thinking. Barney?
It reminds me there's an episode
I love you.
There's an episode of, it was Boy Meets World, and, he's like, oh, I sleep to this ambient soundtrack, and so his friend's over, and he plays it, and you hear crickets and some chirping and stuff, and then all of a sudden you hear like these people screaming at each other and a dog barking and like a domestic dispute and a gun going on, and he looks at the tape, and it's sounds of the trailer park.
Right. Oh. Well, that's we were talking about The Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
I love the fact that he sits around and listens to bowling games.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's all it is you just hear like. And that's literally all it is just the sounds of bowling.
And everything, like almost every big line he feeds to somebody in the movie is a line he heard from something else.
Yeah.
He's like, he doesn't.
This aggression will not stand, man.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on. You want to do, we'll do our kind of progress update.
Okay, so for our progress report, let's go ahead and do our preface, which is I am at 50 hours, and Biff is at
650.
650.
Something like that.
Wow, nice.
I have another stat for you, too.
What's that?
Do you know how many total downloads we have?
How many?
It's over 9,000! What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right!
So, there you go. Progress report over. No.
Thanks for joining us.
Here's our hours.
One of these days, we're going to do like a 10-minute podcast.
Yeah. Progress report. How many hours? You okay, news. Okay, no.
Yeah. Hey, honey, I'm home. Yeah, whatever. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, you know what? I'm digressing.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Happy kerbling.
Speedcast.
Speedcast. There you go.
Speedcasting. For the Kerbler on the go.
We should do like a speed dating episode of Kerbalcast.
Yeah, where it's like you sit down and you have like 6
Just
minutes.
get like a line of women and have them all sit down and go, "Hi, do you know what Kerbal Space Program is?" No. Okay, bye. Hi, do you know what Kerbal Space Program is? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, you stay.
yeah, but get away from me.
Yeah, but what about your cute sister over there?
Yeah. So my progress in the game, I have been working on the contracts, and I'm actually having a lot more fun with it now than I have been.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, you said your opinion has been morphing.
Yeah, my opinion's been gradually changing. I'm getting the Stockholm syndrome with my with my contracts.
It kidnapped you?
No, it loved me, and I just didn't know it yet.
Oh, okay.
And so, testing certain parts, I still have. When you're in the building area at the very bottom right, you can click on your contracts and read the names, but still I'd love to have a little picture.
Right.
Or giant flashing arrows, I know.
And the annoying sound.
Yeah, and the annoying sound.
You have to listen to previous episode 12 to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get funnier as we go.
We're like an onion. We have layers.
No, we just make people cry.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
So, I was working on the ones that test parts. And some of them, like it would say, test landed at Kerbin. Mm-hmm. So you needed to be on Kerbin and landed to test it. So pretty much like I had to do that, thrust 30 thruster.
Right.
I thought you had to test
the little
it.
tiny one that you can't see.
Yeah, I thought you had to be on Kerbin, of course, and you launch the thing, and then you land with it. No. So I basically built like a tiny little fuel, a command pod, tiny little fuel can, mini thruster, and then I built 4 big legs for the thing like, I got 4 girders coming off of that fuel can
Right.
to 4 fuel tanks with no thrusters on them. So there's no way the thing could lift. And with that little tiny thruster. And I would ignite it, and it would pass. So I basically needed to make something, make it just do that. And it was already landed. And the thruster fired.
there's a difference between following the letter and the spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, rules as intended, I did not follow. Rules as written, I followed.
Yeah,
So
apparently.
I made something that couldn't take off, and then I, collected it, recovered vessel, because it never went anywhere, and I got all my money back, and I got the contract. And so I did that with a lot, like anything that says landed in Kerbin, I basically built something that was too heavy to take off from whatever engine or whatever thing it was, and then I just tested it on the launch pad and recovered it.
The developers at Squad are closing that loophole as we speak.
Yeah, they're like, okay, well now I got another thing to fix. And for fun, I did make the rolly.
Oh, did you?
The 2 command pods facing each other with the girder between them.
Yeah.
It's a little hard to control, and it takes a long while. Yeah, and but once you get
Hard
it
to
going,
believe.
it keeps going. You just have to hit Q or R, Q or E. Yeah, Q or E and just hold it, and it'll just keep rolling. And I did put the Separatrons on it, but they're actually too big.
Yeah.
So you would hit them, and they would all explode as they each hit the ground. So it's like boom, 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 and then the thing would take off. So you get one good boost out of it, but I wouldn't recommend it whenever you build your rolly.
So it's 2 capsules on their sides.
Yeah.
And they're connected at the nose by a girder.
Uh-huh.
So it's 2 wheels and an axle.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
and you
And
hold
you go rolling
Q
around.
or E, and it causes there's a primary command pod of the 2, and it just continues to roll. And then eventually, whenever you get to a new piece of terrain, you have your little guy EVA and do a soil sample, and then get back in. But
No, I think what you mean is after rolling around, he probably soiled himself.
yeah, and then he gets out, vomits, picks
Yeah.
up a soggy soil
I was gonna
sample.
say you need the barf bag mod.
But I thought I ran into some trouble because they hopped out and they couldn't get back in because the lid was too high, and I was like jumping and
Yeah.
I was like, oh wait, and I had him just get a running start and run into it
and make it roll.
and I made it roll until he could reach it, and then he got inside. And then I continued, and then I had the other guy get out whenever I hit a different biome and get a different soil sample from like the grasslands.
NOS, taking the space out of Kerbal Space Program.
The rolly.
You do realize the whole point of this game is to be off the ground.
No way.
No.
No.
Apparently not.
The rolly. Trademark. Nostromo.
The roly-poly.
Yeah. So I tried to make an extended rolly that was, those 2 plus another 2 girders plus another 2, wheels.
Oh, you got to be kidding.
That one was a little bit harder because like the hardest part is getting off of the.
Wait a minute. How did you connect them all?
You can put a girder to the bottom of the command pod too.
But then they wouldn't. How could they roll that way?
Because the bell of the command pod is higher than the girder whenever it's on its side.
But when you connect the girder, doesn't that prevent the thing from rolling?
Not if you do it on the bottom. So basically the command pod is sideways, and there's a girder sticking out the top and the bottom of it. Mm-hmm. But so if you were to look at this thing, it's basically like from the middle, it's girder, command pods, girders, command pods.
Oh, I see what you... Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
the thing
I'm
looks like
with
it
you.
looks like a
I'm
big
with you.
looks like a big dumbbell.
Okay.
It's
For some, I had in my... When you said that, in my mind, I had the idea that you had somehow created like this chassis.
Oh,
where
no.
where it was like a whole bunch of them parallel.
Oh.
No, what you're doing is you're just making it wider.
Yeah, just making this really long
Yeah,
axle.
okay.
That
Okay.
was a little bit harder to control because the hardest part about controlling your rolly, trademark Nostromo, is getting it off of the launch pad without running into anything. Because if you get stuck on something, then it's kind of hard to maneuver around. So, but you can have your guy get out and push.
Uh-huh.
So, if you're beginning the game and you really want to get science and really want to do it in a stupid way, make a rolly, trademark Nostromo.
Have you rolled it into the water yet?
No, I haven't. Because I got so far, I thought about going into the water, but I was like, it takes a while to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And you can't,
I bet in the water it would continue to roll.
Yeah.
I don't know that it would go anywhere.
I didn't try doing it with time warp on, so it could probably travel at a pretty good speed.
Maybe so.
Yeah. Because I haven't gotten to the top of a mountain or anything.
You could traverse the globe.
You know what? If you put
Oh no!
if you got it to get rolling, like if you put like do an 8 symmetry,
You know, like a little light bulb just went on over your head.
if you do
It's scary.
if you do an 8 symmetry of fins on the thing, you
Yeah.
could use it as paddles.
That's right.
And I don't know if the game physics work that way. Every time, okay, so last podcast I came up with the rolly, and I was like, I'm trying that when I get home. I'm going to try to make the swimmy, and I'm going to try
The
that when I get
swimmy?
home. Yeah, I'm going to see if I can paddle to another continent.
I want you to find the Kerbal version of the Mighty Mississippi, and then I want you to like paddle.
Make my paddle boat.
Yeah. And if you see like 2 guys on a raft, try and run them over.
Yeah. I'm going to totally try that.
I would totally try that.
Yeah. So
That would work. I bet that would work.
Yeah.
If the water does have the same properties in the game, you know, where you could propel it like that.
and since it would be higher because of the fins, you could actually put separatrons on it, so you could get a really good going start whenever you hit the water. This is all coming together. You got to put antennas on it because I don't know. It's a one-way trip.
So did you leave the ground at any point?
Yeah, I did the suborbital ones.
Okay.
Yeah, like so I just built this giant thing with stuff all over it. Okay, this got me, and I did not like it. So I launched this monstrosity of parts to do a suborbital, and I make it up, and at one point I need to test the gear set or whatever, the little wheels,
Right.
you know? And so they give me that part just for that, and I go to try them. And it says test them at this altitude, this speed, you know, or in a suborbital, so speed didn't matter. So it was like this altitude, which was like 80,000,
Right.
you know, meters above Kerbin in the Kerbin system. So I met all those parameters, and I hit the gear button to extend and retract them, and it didn't happen. You have to right-click it and click the button for test.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's not a test button otherwise. It only exists for this. Unless I was completely oblivious, I didn't see anything telling me that there was a button for testing.
Let me, I was going to ask you, and this is a good point for that. Are you having trouble right-clicking? Because you know they fixed that with a patch.
Yeah.
If I F9 and reload, from that point on, I start having trouble with my right-click again.
Yeah, I have that. I had that issue with things sometimes where I would right-click something, and I'd try to right-click something else, and the new thing wouldn't come up.
Right.
And so I had to like click around and go into orbital view and come out, or you know.
When I first load the game, I can right-click on anything
Yeah.
with no trouble.
Yeah.
But as soon as I reload, you know, then a lot of times it's, you know, click, 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 and finally it'll come up.
Yeah. I've had that issue. I had that issue before before 0.24.
I wonder if anyone else has.
Yeah. So.
Because I know they fixed it with a patch, but it doesn't seem like a total fix.
Yeah, it's like whenever you revert, you also revert back before the patch or something. Yeah.
Reverting back just tosses out the patch.
So I did the rolly. I had those contracts I was working on.
Next stop, the splashy.
I'm trying to do the MUN mission, but I don't have the things that I unlocked before.
Okay, here's my question.
Yeah.
You've got the rolly. You want to do the splashy? If I told you to go do the wedgie, what would you come up with?
We're gonna have to come up with the wedgie. If anyone can come up with the wedgie, send a
What is the
screenshot to Biff.
No, please don't. I'm scared of what the wedgie pictures would look like.
So my new challenge is doing the MUN mission, but whenever I made my trip to the MUN and I had my successful MUN landing and everything, I had those gigantic thrusters and fuel cans and all that stuff. I don't have it right now. And I was a little stuck on science because what got me through so much science to get all that stuff before was the, giant, sun fun run that I went on, where I got a whole bunch of science slingshotting around the sun and coming back. Well, I didn't want to do that because I'm a little scared to do it now because if I get that science and a contract comes up that asks me to get it, I can't get it.
Right.
So I don't want to endanger my ability to fulfill a contract later on by doing something else, which isn't good.
Right.
But, it's how I'm playing now.
That's what science mode is for.
Yeah, that's what science mode is for. Because, now if I go out and I do something crazy, well, if they ask me to do it again later on, it's like, well, I already did it. But now I'm doing it for money and reputation. So,
I was questioning myself because I've been I think I've been a little harder on career mode than you have.
Yeah.
And as you said, your opinion is evolving. I have really kind of questioned why I have not gotten into career mode, especially considering that I am constantly restarting science mode.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not uncommon for me to completely finish all of my tech tree and then start a brand new science mode game. And I thought, okay, so why am I doing that?
Yeah.
And yet I don't want to do that in career. And I think the difference is that getting science, how you get the science is completely up to you. Whereas career mode tells you what to do.
Yeah, it's like
And I think that's the difference.
yeah, because they had collect science from the lower and upper atmosphere,
Right.
and I already just instinctively did it whenever I did my first launch.
Right.
I was like, because you get the science, and it's like, well, now get it, and I was like, well, I already did that,
Right.
so let's hope it lets me do it. But I was behind on science while I was making this, this Munlander, and I needed 2 very important tech, slots opened up. Guess what they were?
Roly and Poly.
It was RCS,
And
then one that I think is extremely important that we both had trouble with. Ladders. I needed a ladders because you have to go down and get a soil sample, otherwise the contract isn't complete.
Right.
And I don't want to do all this and then be like, "Oh, you forgot this one thing." And
Did I tell you how I got around that finally?
You restarted?
No, well, I built my landers. You know how you have the mobile lab?
Yeah.
The last lander I built, I'm not kidding, I built it. It still has the landing legs and everything, but in the middle, the mobile lab is on the bottom of it, so that when my lander touches down, there's 4 landing legs that touch down and the bottom of the mobile lab.
Oh, okay.
And the guy just opens the door and steps out.
Oh, there you go.
And gets all his stuff and then gets back in. And that's how I solved the problem. Was now I don't even need ladders. And what I do is I launch, and once I'm actually in space, that's where I transfer 2 Kerbals out of the command pod into that. I land, they get whatever it is they need, take back off. Once I'm back in space, they get back in the command pod. And then when I come back into the atmosphere, it separates, and the science module lands by itself.
Oh, okay.
And the command pod lands by itself. But yeah, I've kind of, and I haven't been back to Eve since my last difficulty.
Yeah.
But the next time I do go, I'll have that. And so it'll be like, no ladder's going to get me this time. Because, they're already going to be on the ground.
Yeah.
So they'll be able to just step right out.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
It'd be like, it's my version of the Interstellar mobile home.
Oh, yeah. One thing that has helped unlocking those 2 things of science has been the contracts, actually. Mm-hmm. Because those 2 suborbitals, they gave me 45 science between the 2. Which I put that with, some science that I got from just, doing other stuff. And I managed to buy those tech trees faster and without having to do the giant sun run in order to get all that science just to get a huge boost.
Have you noticed a difference as your reputation has improved? Have you noticed a difference in the types of contracts?
No, there's yellow is bad, isn't it? And then
something like that.
Yeah, it's yellow. And I'm in the blue, and I'm eventually.
There's not a red, right?
Not that I've seen.
Okay.
And there's eventually there's this blue.
You have to kill somebody to have a red reputation.
Yeah. There's this dark and light blue striped area,
right?
And I haven't made it there yet. And so I was just I don't know about that. So I'm gaining reputation. It's kind of hard to lose,
right?
So it's I'm just gaining it rapidly, because even if I make a disastrous spacecraft, I always have the command pod to couple with a parachute, so I never lose the guy.
Kerbals are very forgiving.
Yeah. Oh, something.
Well, he blew up my whole family, but he means well.
I was trying to do the save a Kerbal thing, where he's in orbit and you try to save the little guy.
Oh yeah.
And I don't really know how to do that. But I was building things, and I eventually built something that was a probe command pod, and I attached a empty command pod to the bottom of it.
Oh.
So that was going to be my seat, So I was basically, the thing was going to fly unmanned up to him, and then he was going to get in, and he was going to fly it home. It's
But you do have parachutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
that
say,
was the thing. I had to check
The whole
that.
thing is academic if you don't have parachutes.
Yeah. And so I launched this thing, and then right when I go to launch, Jebediah is in the seat. I'm like, no. And so I go back to, vehicle assembly.
Right.
And I pull him out, and I go to launch the thing, and I realize, I forgot something. I reverted back to
Some of those guys' names are hard to pronounce.
Yeah. I went back to vehicle assembly,
right,
because I forgot, something needed to be strutted. Mm-hmm. And so then I go back to launch, and Bill's in the seat. And so I really think, like, anytime they wheeled it out there, somebody just hops in. Yeah. They're like, no, get out. It's like, anytime you try to, you're trying to get in your car and your dog keeps jumping in. You're like, no, we're not going. We're not going there. Yeah. Like, get out. It's like anytime I went back and I opened up the door, somebody decided to keep going, and like, no, get out of there.
So you're saying Bill has his head stuck out the window and his tongue hanging out?
Yeah. So I almost just had him EVA and then went back to, like, have him just sit there on the launch pad. Right. And like, no, you have to.
No, get in there.
I'll turn this thing around. Yeah. And then just continue flying with the probe.
Just do it in the suit.
Yeah. So what's your progress been?
Okay. You remember last time I told you that I've been messing around with the grabber, and I've been experimenting with building an orbit.
Yeah.
And this is something I'll talk about it in more detail later in the program, because we actually have a letter that this ties into.
Yeah.
But what I had done was I was slowly building something in orbit, and I even tweeted out a picture of this. And I was using, instead of the docking hatches as connectors, I was using the grabbers. And as I expected, trying to build something symmetrically with the grabbers is not easy.
Yeah.
And so I was at the point where I was thinking to myself, I wonder if there's a way to use docking hatches as guides, use those and grabbers.
Oh, okay.
And kind of build something in orbit and have it be symmetrical and have it be stable. And right about this time, here comes this letter from a listener, and they said, you're always talking about how you can't build anything in orbit because it's not stable.
Well, you're right.
No, it was the other one.
Oh, okay.
No, you're completely wrong. Quit playing the game. No, he said, here's a screenshot of how I do it. And it was one of those, I looked at it and the solution was so simple, and I was going, why didn't I think of that? What it is, he's got the center fuel tank, and he's got, coming off of it, he's using girders, and the girders are coming off at a right angle. Okay.
Yeah.
And at the end of the girder is a docking hatch. Okay. And he's got them arranged. I think he had it where it was 6, but I did it where it was 4 because it was easier, since I'm just kind of experimenting. But what it is you put the docking hatches on the end of these girders, and you bring your fuel tanks in and connect to that, and that gives you your symmetry. And what I did, he didn't do this in his, but I added at the other end of the fuel tank, I put grabbers. And so what I do is I bring in the fuel tank, I dock it with the hatch, and then once it's lined up, then I arm the grabber, and it grabs the bottom of it, and then the whole thing is just completely symmetrical and completely solid.
Nice.
And it's really cool. And I'm in the process now of building something in orbit. I'm just, like I said, I'm not really building anything with any intention of making it, of using it.
Yeah.
It's just I'm constructing something to see if I can.
Yeah.
And so far it's locking together exactly the way it's supposed to. And it is nice and stable. And I can see very easily now how, with a little kind of forethought and planning, how I could build a larger craft that I could use to go to other planets.
Yeah.
Because the what I had been doing was basically grabbing a big fuel tank and balancing it on the nose of a craft, and then flying that around, and I would keep transferring fuel. I can see myself now actually building a very large interplanetary ship, but that's we'll talk about it more in the program when we get to the letter. But it was one of those things where I can't believe I didn't think about this.
Yeah.
But you know what I think it is? I think as you play the game, there are certain parts that you use a lot,
Definitely.
and sometimes even if it's not the best part for what you're trying to do, because you're used to it, that's what you tend to go to. Mm-hmm. You remember we talked about the iPod and keeping track of what you play.
Yeah.
I bet if the game kept track of the number of times you used individual parts, there'd be some that you use a lot and some that you use nothing. Well, I, somewhere along the lines, got out of the habit of using girders. I stopped. I don't know why, but I think anytime I needed that kind of a connector, I tended to use decouplers.
Oh yeah, like the radial ones, because there's a little bit of an extension there. So.
Yeah, something like that. And I had gotten away to where I wasn't using girders at all, and so that's why it never occurred to me that the solution that I was looking for was a girder.
You know, a Kerbal Psychologist would say that you have problems with security and commitment.
Yeah,
you're always ready to decouple everything.
Oh, okay.
You need to hold on. Your life needs more girders, Biff.
Does that mean I'm attached to Kerbal Mommy?
It's like you just keep decoupling everything that gets close. At any point, you're ready for it all to fall apart.
I guess so. But that's my progress. I have been experimenting with that, with different build modes. What I actually did, because I was in science mode when I was trying to do all this, and I wasn't having a whole lot of success. And then when I got the email with the screenshots, I started a new game in Sandbox, because right there it was kind of like, oh, I need, if I'm going to experiment with this, I need like access to all the parts. And that's how I was able to do a fairly simple, I'll tweet out a picture of this, but I was able to do a fairly simple craft. And like I said, it's stable, and it is the plain Jane vanilla game. There's no mods involved at all. These are stock parts.
Because everyone was suggesting you do like Kerbal attachment system,
right.
Whenever you find a workaround like that, it always feels like, I did this. It's like whenever you're playing an RPG or something. I always knew people that would like, oh yeah, you get to level 80 and then you can kill that level 20 boss like nothing. You kill him in one hit. And I was like, I would fight him when I'm level 15. I was like, because if you don't win by the skin of your teeth, you're not trying.
Did you ever play Elder Scrolls Oblivion?
No, I played Skyrim.
Okay, I loved Oblivion. I love Skyrim too. But I think I played Oblivion for about a year. That was the one I told you at work. I was like printing out stats charts and apparently too cheap to go buy the strategy guide or something. But the thing that was kind of frustrating for me about Oblivion was that your enemies leveled up as you did. And so, and I didn't know that. And so I did like the whole mage quest. Right. And I got done and I was like this really powerful, butt kicking mage.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, now I'm going to go back to the first level and I'm going to go stomp their puny little butts. And I show up and they're all the same level I am. It's like, crap.
Yeah, there was like a JRPG. It's called Lunar, like Silver Star Sword.
Yeah.
Now the normal monsters, they didn't level up. So you get to level 80 and you're running around like squishing all these little level 4 slimes and stuff. You're like, take that. But the bosses did. But they didn't level up like they were the same level as you. They took whatever your stats were and multiplied them by a certain amount.
Right.
So if there was a monster that was really strong, it would take whatever your strength was and double it. So he would always be twice as strong as you are.
Right.
So you'd have to use some other method in order to beat him because it's like, oh, I'll just get stronger than him. It's like, nope, he's still stronger than you. So you either learned new abilities to counter it, or you came up with a new strategy. Okay, well, I'll use my speed. I'll just attack faster than he does. So it always opened up a lot of like really cool strategies.
Did you ever play Guild Wars?
No.
They had I thought this was very clever. They one of the final bosses was you.
Oh yeah,
they had
like shadow version. Or something.
Well, it was you had to go into an arena and basically fight a copy of yourself. And
Stop hitting yourself. Why
are you hitting yourself? Whatever you armed, whatever spells you took in, whatever you took in is what was created against you. And it was really, you really had to think about, it was like, well, do I really want, heal all spell? And do I really want the giant club? And, I thought that was a very clever mechanic.
Yeah, you wouldn't do anything you wouldn't do to yourself.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate form of like telling you, for peace.
Well, you were trying to figure out, okay, how can I make myself wimpy and at the same time strong enough to beat the wimpy me?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, it was interesting. So I think that was this week's, but I digress. Well, so that does it for our progress report. I guess what we're going to do at this point, we're going to go ahead and take a break, and then we'll come back, and we will read your letters in this week's crew report.
It's over 9,000! What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right! Lakita, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000!
Now let's get to the letters in this week's crew report.
And our first letter comes to us from Matt from Brooklyn. And this is the letter that I was talking about beforehand during the progress update.
Yeah.
Remember I said I was trying to build a craft? And,
With the grabbers and stuff.
Yeah. And somebody wrote in and basically solved the problem that I had been working on. Use a girder, dummy. Matt from Brooklyn says, keep up the good work. Loving the podcast. Thank you, Matt. He says, I consider myself a mid-level player. I don't know how many hours I've played KSP, nor do I think I want to know. There are some things that are not knowing. But I finished the tech tree and been to all the planets. I consider that a mid. To me, that's an upper mid-level player.
Upper, like, if you've completed the tech tree or that you've been to all the planets?
All the planets.
Oh, yeah.
I have not been to all the planets. I've been to Duna and Eve and whatever the closest one is to the sun. I think Elu.
You got me.
Yeah. I think I burned up in the orbit.
All that exists is the Mun in my little universe. That is all I have encountered.
What about Minmus?
I haven't encountered it yet.
Oh, okay. Okay. When you see Minmus, I mean, you'll think it's one of two things. You'll either think it's sherbet or you'll think it's green cheese.
Depending on how I have my monitor set up.
I guess so. Yeah. Let's see. He says, I've been enjoying the podcast, but I keep getting frustrated when you talk about how unstable clamps are for large craft and moving around lots of fuel. I thought I would share a few pictures of a relatively maneuverable fuel tug that I designed. And that's what I was talking about. It's where he's using the girders with the docking ports at the ends of it. He says, I'm like you are. Everything's stock, no mods. Otherwise, what's the point? The lone exception being engineer. Without it, it's simply too much time to spend and not know what your Delta V looks like. I hope they put that in the stock game soon so I can claim to be totally mod free. Oh, do you know what? I'm sorry. Do you know what he says next? But I digress.
Oh, nice.
I'm sorry, I didn't notice that. That just, when I saw that coming up, I just started laughing.
People are going to start putting that in their letters and then telling us about their cats and stuff. But I digress.
But I digress.
So my cats, and I'm like,
my cat's name is Jeb. But I digress. Anyway, it's designed in three basic sections: the head, the 6 arms. Remember, I told you that I did the 4.
Yeah,
because it was easier.
Yeah,
he does it as 6. The 6 arms and the engine. A total of 8 launches, which is a lot, I suppose, but totally worth it. Feel free to share the concept on the podcast if you think it would be helpful to folks. It was helpful to one folk.
Oh, it got shared.
This one right here.
Yeah, so if you want to go stock, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and he says, and feel free to ask me any questions you might have about the craft. What's your next letter?
This one's from Zaktar. He writes in to tell us that he enjoyed our rendition of his last letter on episode 12.
Yeah.
Well,
remember he wrote it in like it was
like a newsflash.
Yeah, like a newsflash. Yeah. What was it? The Empire of Zakovania?
Yeah, Zakovania.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a fun letter. Thanks for writing it. .24 has been a blast so far. Finished 1 run of career and am now struts deep in a new sandbox game full of explosions and dead accelerating Kerbals. Thanks for your entertaining podcast. Well, thank you, Zach.
Well, thank you. Do you remember last podcast where we had all kinds of closing saying. Remember, we had all those sayings. That
like little sign-off things.
Yeah,
or,
like like may you have a star to steer by, and
or steer to star by.
yeah, steer to star by, and enough fuel to get you home.
Yeah.
From listener Shay, he says apparently having a send-off phrase for your Kerbals is fairly common. As a child, like most, I had an obsession with dinosaurs. One of my favorite dinosaur movies was the 2002 film Dinotopia. My send-off phrase is breathe deep, fly high.
See, there was a...
And now I'm flying high.
Anytime, like, I'm, entering the atmosphere, whenever I hit the parachutes, like, I always have this thought, it's like a shirt I saw one time or something. It's like, here's to hoping it'll open. And then
Hoping it'll open.
Here's to hoping it'll open.
I love the visual you did with that, because you said, I'm entering the atmosphere, and at the same time you said it, you were flapping your arms. I was like, really?
Like,
that's how you...
Yeah. I just came in from the mud, and boy, I just flew in from the mud, and boy, are my arms tired.
Little Icarus action there.
Yeah. From Skyzar.
Hail, Skyzar!
Hail, Skyzar.
Hail, Skyzar!
First, let me say how much I enjoyed listening to the podcast and have done since the first one.
Yay!
Hey! Biff's expertise is about the same
Hail,
as mine.
Skyzar again!
Biff's expertise is about the same as mine with a similar hour count, and there's always so much to learn from a beginner like Nas, who will go down different paths like making the rolly. I threw that in.
Yeah.
And notice things the rest of us have missed.
You know what he's
like how to make a rolly.
Yeah. he's politely saying he just likes to laugh at you. Hail, Skyzar!
It's like the misadventures of I'm just this idiot like slapping things together. They're like, all right, let's see what he does this time.
I guarantee you, nobody other than you is like slapping capsules together and call them rollies. I mean, that is totally unique.
Yeah, I can't wait for multiplayer so we can have the rolly races and get a whole bunch of people together. And like the parameters are the only thing that can touch the ground are command pods.
Now that would be worthy of a Steam card.
Yeah. Whoever wins the rolly races.
Yeah.
Skyzar.
Hail, Skyzar!
This makes the show so much more entertaining than if you had one obsessive loon who can do a single stage Eve return before breakfast and speaks as if the only people he ever talks to are NASA engineers. Not that I'm thinking of anyone in particular.
Okay.
Anyway, the reason I'm writing is to bring your listeners' attention to OpenRocket, an open-source model rocket simulator. It's brilliant. Not as well developed as KSP, perhaps, but great fun nonetheless. You can get it from openrocket.sourceforge.net.
I clicked on that.
Yeah, I went to it too, and and like it started,
my head exploded.
It's technical.
Yeah,
it is technical.
Oh yeah.
And now you can. I was like putting little pieces together, and it like KSP has a learning curve to where and it's not just like how do I learn
right.
delta V, what that means and everything.
Right.
You have to learn like, okay, this is what I need to click and right click and stuff like that. This definitely had that too. Like, you saw what all the parts were, but, like, you had to read and set some stats. And
the learning curve on this is 4 years of aeronautics school.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, you start messing with it, and it's really cool. Like, I wonder if someone were
I'm not being fair. I mean, I glanced at it and went, ah!
Yeah. I think if you were to mess with it a lot, it probably has more variables to it than KSP might have.
Oh, yeah.
And if you really learned how to use it, I think anything you did in KSP would seem easier by default.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like it's a good place to train up. Back to OpenRocket, you don't get a 3D animated flight sequence, but you do get a graph, and they're always fun. My first rocket only got 7 meters, but my third was up to 900.
I have to say, graphs are pretty fun.
Yeah. Just as in KSP, the secret to great altitudes is efficient staging. So you can use what you have learned from that game. Yeah, it's like I think what you learned from either game would help you in this thing.
There have been many a rocket where I've built it correctly, but I haven't staged it correctly.
Yeah.
And half the trick is just figuring out,
yeah,
this don't
stage,
ignite this one yet.
If I drop this part, then it makes it lighter, which makes the stage more effective.
Because sometimes, you'll build these giant bottom stages, and you'll launch everything. You'll fire them all. And then you realize, no, actually, I only need about half of those. And then once you get to a certain altitude, you drop them.
Yeah.
And then you use the other half, and it's like, oh, now I just went twice as far. So is there more to the letter?
He said, I found OpenRocket particularly fascinating because I always wanted to have a go at some model rocketry, but it's not allowed over here in the UK. they think that if we have explosives, we'll use them to blow up Parliament. But we can have fireworks. Try to figure that one out.
Remember.
Yeah.
I guess we're done with letters, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, let's move on. The next thing we're going to do is mission briefing. We'll talk about some Kerbal news, and that's after the break.
It is now time for the news in the mission briefing.
And our first bit of news, this comes to us from Reddit. And this was a post that was called, "This Game More or Less Saved My Life." And it comes to us from username Thanks for Space. And I emailed him and asked if it was okay if we use this.
Yeah.
And he says, and this is obviously the abbreviated version. If you want to read the whole version, we have a link to it on our Twitter.
Yeah, we retweeted Kerbal Space Program's tweet about it.
Yeah, they retweeted it as well. So, Thanks for Space says, "I've struggled with depression for a long time. Any way of staying alive just seemed like a chore. I got this game about a month ago and I got addicted instantly. I logged 40 hours in my first 2 days. It got me interested in space and all the math that makes a space program possible. I watched Apollo 13 and a bunch of space documentaries and decided that I wanted to be involved in space somehow. In a month, I will be in college pursuing a degree in astronomy or astrophysics. This game reminded me that the universe is a cool place worth sticking around to learn about. And even if I never end up getting a career in this field, I still have a dream and something to work towards. So thank you very much to everybody at Squad and all of the modders out there." That is such a cool letter.
Yeah, it is really cool.
Yeah.
Like, if you ever hit any sort of point like that, a lot of people will mention something, and it's not, everyone expects it to be like a self-help book or
Right.
something like that,
Right.
that pulls somebody out of a situation like that. Most of the time, it's odd things.
Yeah.
It's like a game, or I read the book House of Leaves is what helped them out of it, and that book has nothing to do with overcoming an issue like that, but it's enough to show them there's more they want to experience in the world and kind of give them a different perspective.
Lifelines come from all different directions.
Yeah.
And there's no rhyme or reason to what they are sometimes. But you know what? If it's a lifeline, grab it.
Yeah.
You know? And
Yeah.
it's cool that it's Kerbal Space Program.
Yeah, and Thanks for Space. We're glad you're a part of this community.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing. Go ahead. What's our next item?
Next story is congrats to Kerbal Space Program for winning the 2014 Vision of the Future Award.
Woohoo!
Given out by the Space Frontier Foundation, or SFF, the award is for outstanding achievement in presenting the possibilities of the space frontier to the general public.
Can I do music while you do this?
Yeah. It is awarded to a future-oriented entertainment media-related project such as film, TV, or radio, primarily in the science fiction genre. No, we're quoting now.
Oh, we're quoting.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Quote, Kerbal Space Program has proven itself as an influential public force. KSP is a computer-based simulator allowing the user to create his or her own space program based on actual materials and physics, end quote. The foundation...
Can I do music again?
Yeah.
Boom, boom.
The foundation said they're giving Kerbal Space Program the Vision of the Future Award for teaching the public about how a space program operates, in addition to showing what the new space industry is capable of.
Play that funky
In music.
music. What? Sorry.
Your story.
Oh, I have to stop singing and actually read. You can go to the NASA website, and it looks like there are some free ebooks that you can get. And there's quite a few here, but there's one in particular I wanted to point out. It's called X-15, Extending the Frontiers of Flight. The X program, space planes.
Oh.
Yeah, they were...
Wait, not like the SpaceX program. It's different.
Yeah, totally different.
Not
not
the Elon Musk
Elon
thing.
Musk thing.
Okay,
No, the X program, it was, here, I'll just read the description. It says, the X-15 was the ultimate X vehicle. Built in the 1950s, she became the fastest and highest flying winged aircraft of its time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there was, at the same time that we were putting people on rockets and shooting them up into space in capsules and things, there was also a lot of work going on with rocket-powered flight.
Nice.
You literally took off and went as close to, right into the edge of space, and then would bring it back down and land it.
There's nothing but a rocket and a stick of Beemans.
That's I'll pay you back later. But anyway, if you would like to get this book, or and again, there's several here. But it's www.nasa.gov/connect/ebooks. And I type that in, and it takes you right to the page.
Oh, awesome.
And there's about, it looks like there's about 2 pages worth. There's actually quite a few categories. So chances are you're going to find something to read, and it's free.
Yeah.
Free.
Have you read any of them? Have you looked at any of them?
No, I just discovered this.
Oh,
I
okay.
haven't had a chance to.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
But
I want to.
You have to write a full book report.
I have to write a full book report. That right there. That is the way to kill any enjoyment of reading anything.
You know what? We'll just pick a book, and we'll just have a segment where we just read like one random page from it.
My book report.
All right, now we're on episode 500, and we just finished the first chapter of this book.
You know what I did as a kid? This is one of those stupid things that only kids do.
Yeah.
It was I had to write a book report about a book, and I copied. They had a blurb on the back where they were talking about, this is a great book, and it's all that, and I copied it, and then I turned it in with the book.
Oh,
right,
no.
and the teacher was like, okay, you do realize I can see both things.
Yeah. Hey, I invented a new word.
What?
Plagiarism.
Yeah. Kid plagiarism. Junior plagiarism.
Next story. There was a discussion on the KSP subreddit that received quite a few upvotes and comments. Username old account wanted to know why you're having to navigate 3 menu levels to quit the game. Here are some of the responses. Smushcan said, to add to this, why on earth can't I access the control settings while in the game? If I need to rebind a key or reverse a joystick axis, I have to quit all the way out to the main menu, change it, and then go all the way back in to see if it works.
Yeah, you have limited control on the settings when the game itself is going.
Yeah, KSP is great, but sometimes I wonder if Squad has ever played it. Oh.
Burn.
Oh, Smushcan.
Ouch. Ouch.
Shots fired.
Ouch. That was mean.
Noel of Noel. Because that's how it's spelled, and I can pronounce it any way I want.
It's either Noel of Noel or Noel of Noel.
I'm going to read this. or read it.
Yeah. It depends on what emphasis you put on which syllable.
I've been thinking this since I updated to 0.24.2 and saw the lovely new quit menu. Why on Kerbin isn't there an exit to desktop button there? Jodo42 says, while I agree with a lot of the posters here, I feel something needs to be brought up. What might seem like minor improvements to the user interface can wind up being a massive coding nightmare. UI rewrites often mess with parts of the code that have been there for a long time and which other parts of the game rely on. So while it'd be nice to have a quicker way to quit the game, ideas like a full settings menu available from the in-flight escape menu aren't likely to happen for a while, in my opinion. I am in no way officially reflective of the KSP development process.
There are times when I sound like the pickiest guy, and then there's other times like this where I think, I've been exiting out of the game that way for a year, and at no point did I think to myself, why do I have to click so many menus?
Yeah, there were times where I was like, I already F5'd. I don't want to have to go through that. So you would, you'd Alt-Tab, and then right-click and close it, or
what somebody say Alt F4?
Yeah, Alt F4.
Okay.
It's like you just quick ways to get out of it. Yeah. And because it's like I don't want to. It's like, oh, okay.
Never occurred to me.
I need to leave the vehicle assembly. Yeah. Okay, now I got to leave the building view. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, I'm in the menu. Do I want to leave? Yes, I already decided 3 times I wanted to leave. It's time to leave, and then you can quit. Yeah. Like it's like trying to opt out of a contract.
Never bothered me.
Yeah.
Never. I will say, you know how I had talked about how happy I was that they had implemented the new save system?
Yeah.
Messing around with the game last night, and I got myself, I had saved, I was in a position to where there wasn't really a whole lot I could do from that point.
Uh-huh.
And it was nice to be able to go back to an earlier save, because the way it used to be,
it was
wherever you quick saved,
that's where you were.
That's where you
and
were.
I had staged saving.
It was really neat. It was neat to be able to go pick a save point, because what it did was it saved me a lot of hassle.
Yeah. It's kind of like in a game whenever it goes back to the autosave, but that's right before the rocket hits you. And so then you die, and then you go back to the autosave right before the rocket hits you. And you're like,
well, I told you about when I saved, and I would reload, and it would be like 10 feet above the ground, and my parachutes weren't there.
Yeah, yeah.
Not much I can do there. Let's see. Last thing we have, and this also comes from the Kerbal Space Program subreddit, and the topic is, does the funds system actually add anything to the gameplay? And since you're doing mostly career mode, so I'm going to defer to you on a lot of this. This is from Etsy, and it says, first of all, I must add that I like some of the objectives. They are fun. I have not really experienced any situation where I have limited the stuff I put on a rocket because it costs too much. And if I fail, I just revert to launch. So unless you're playing very hardcore mode, the only thing that actually costs funds are successful missions. The only thing I see it limiting is the amount of fun missions I can do. And in response, let's see, Woog says, try doing it without reverting to launch. Technical Tortoise says, money is too easy to get, so it is meaningless.
I will say that in my experience, if you just revert anytime something goes wrong, then yeah, it doesn't have a point, because you can build, wild far and away, building all sorts of crazy stuff. Like when you first start career mode, you couldn't build something, insane, because first off, you don't have a whole lot of the parts, and you don't have a whole lot of money to do it with. Mm-hmm. But later on, whenever you start having tons of parts to mess with, you have the ability to build giant, crazy rockets that could go and do feasible missions. But by then, you've succeeded in enough contracts that you've earned enough money that there's not really much restriction there. But if you were to not do a reversion play style, if that rocket collapses, you're back to testing parts again in order to get the money to get going.
That is kind of one of those. That's one of those willpower type things. There's a game that came out. I guess it's been over a year now, but it's called State of Decay.
Yeah,
and it's a zombie game where you start out and you've got like a friend with you, and the game is meant, you're not supposed to revert to save.
Yeah.
Okay. If you lose a team member or if you lose items or whatever, the whole point of the game is that your actions have consequences. And they don't want you to revert back to your earlier saves. If you lose a team member, you've lost them. If you lose items, you've lost them. And I was reading the review and I was thinking, oh, that sounds great. And then the first time I played it and lost somebody, I was like, revert to save.
Oh, they give you the option to.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying is a lot of times these consequence games, it's more about your own willpower, because it's kind of like, well, I don't want to lose that guy.
Anytime I've talked video games with people and they're like, oh yeah, you can put in the cheat codes and stuff. Yeah. I say I try not to learn any cheat codes until I've done everything I could possibly want to do in the game. Because once you know that's an option, it's like once you start, it's like, oh, I can do infinite fuel.
Yeah.
It's like anytime you're low on fuel, it's like, well, I can infinite fuel. If you have something to fall back on, it's always going to come up as an option, and it's kind of hard to resist it whenever you're doing something to have fun. Yeah. Unless you can make yourself have fun in trying to make it off of nothing. Like whenever I made it back from the Mun, if I would have hit infinite fuel, I wouldn't have been like, oh, let's see if I can do this. But I didn't, so then I had to use like Oberth effect and air braking and stuff to try to make it where I couldn't have normally.
I still say the most fun missions I've ever done in this game have been the ones where I have pulled off these miraculous saves with nothing.
Yeah,
there's no way this amount of fuel is going to get me home. I got home.
Yeah, because whenever you introduce any sort of cheat code, it takes away any sense of threat or danger. So any accomplishment is dwindled. Yeah. It's like not as impactful.
Well, let's see. We're done with our news?
Yep.
Okay. Well, you know what that means.
And now another edition of As the Kerbin Turns.
Honey, I'm home.
Hello, dear. How was your day?
Oh, same as always. I failed a bunch of contracts and ruined my reputation. Now I'm completely out of money and no one will work with me ever again. Say, you still love me, don't you, honey? Honey? Honey?
Tune in next time for another edition of As the Kerbin Turns.
Ooh.
That was...
But I digress?
Yeah, let's do But I Digress.
But I digress.
But I digress. This week, we are going to focus on Apollo 15. This podcast is being recorded on the week of August the 4th, 2014, and this is the 43rd anniversary of Apollo 15. 43 years ago this week, Apollo 15 landed on the moon. They took off on July the 26th. They landed on July the 30th, and they were on the moon for 3 days. We're going to start, we have some audio from the mission, and we're going to start with the landing.
7% fuel.
Which ended up being a little bit rough.
15 at 1.
And there was a reason for that.
-1.
This is a quote from A Man on the Moon, written by Andrew Chaikin.
10 feet, -1.
He says that the lunar module, which was known as the Falcon, was several thousand pounds heavier than previous landers.
8 feet, -1.
And so Falcon fell to the moon with a firm thud
Contact.
that rattled every piece of gear in the cabin and brought an exclamation of surprise from Irwin.
Bam.
The ship pitched backwards slightly and then tipped to one side.
Okay, Houston, the Falcon is on the plane at Hadley. Roger, Roger, Falcon.
Turns out that when they landed, it was on a little bit of an incline, and one of the pads had sunk into an impact crater, a very shallow impact crater.
Oh, so yeah, so it was like
off
kilter in
yeah,
two
it was
ways.
a little off kilter. The mission control jokingly referred to it as Leaning Tower of Pisa.
I think I've had more extreme reactions whenever I've landed. I was like, man, you know,
Man.
I don't know if mine would have made it back to Houston.
Yeah.
What I would probably said.
Yeah,
So-
mine wouldn't have been family friendly.
I watched the documentary by NASA, you know, In the Mountains of the Moon.
Right.
It was out in '71, and like it's on YouTube. You just look it up and you can find it. And so I was watching them go through the landing.
Do you know
part.
that the entire broadcast of all of their EVAs you can watch on YouTube?
Oh, really?
Yeah, like all several hours worth. If you
Oh,
want
wow.
to. Yeah.
No, I didn't look for
Yeah.
those. I just
you got like the greatest hits highlights.
yeah,
version.
yeah. It was a I was afraid it was going to be like super dated or anything
Right.
like that, and it was like a fun thing to watch. It was like 30 minutes, and so it was crazy because they compacted all of the later planned things into one, and so I think that this had more mishaps because they were putting so many eggs in this one basket.
Yeah, and a lot of those eggs, that was the first time they were serving them too.
Yeah. So like they didn't know what was going to go on, and it was like the first day they go out and they got their rover and they go out and they hop in, and it's supposed to be all-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive,
Right.
And the front-wheel drive doesn't work, and so they're like, oh, and
they had to steer with the rear.
yeah,
wheel.
so
Yeah,
it's
that's what I
rear-wheel
thought.
drive.
Yeah,
And they said it really didn't affect much, and it was like oh, it's still okay.
yeah,
And I mean, you don't need as much traction,
sure.
but you think that they talk about it being a bumpy ride, and a thought that came up is like, well, the gravity's lower, but the gravity makes you more sensitive.
Yeah.
To like you push somebody in lower gravity, they're going to fly farther.
Well, I read somewhere one of the guys said that if they hit even the slightest bump, I mean, the lunar rover would literally lift off the ground and float briefly.
Yeah.
And, one of the guys said, I hate seatbelts, but I wore them on that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he'd be like laying on the ground next to it.
It's funny because I could see the hate seatbelts comic because it was in the
Yeah.
70s. So you have like those big muscle cars and it was
Right.
bench seats and stuff. So you didn't want to if you've ever sat in one of those, the seatbelts aren't fun.
Well, the documentary that you watched, did they talk about the Genesis rock?
Yeah.
Okay.
They showed a couple of clips of it and they were talking like
The Apollo 15 mission, and I mean, they were all of the missions were geologically significant, but one of the most significant geological finds came on the second EVA. As I said, Apollo 15 was on the moon for 3 days, and they did 3 EVAs.
yeah, which is nuts. I mean, imagine like all right, well, you go to sleep
Yeah.
and you wake up and
you're
you
on the moon.
and you're on the moon.
Yeah.
It's like if anything is like pinch me, I'm dreaming. It's like no, you just woke up and you're on the moon.
Yeah. The astronauts had gone through very extensive geological training. The idea wasn't to make them geologists. It was to make them trained eyes. And one of the things that they were looking for was called anorthosite. And the the area that they were in was an impact basin. And the geologists had hoped that some of the deep crust material had been ejected due to the earlier impact.
Oh, yeah.
And so what they were looking for primordial material. Mm-hmm. And the Genesis rock, like I said, approximately 4.5 billion years old, it formed during a time when the outer layers of the moon was molten magma. And as it cooled, this rock formed. They had found similar rocks, but this was the largest one they found.
Oh, man, look at that. Look at the glint. Almost see twinning in there. Guess what we just found? Guess what we just found? I think we found what we came for. Crystalline rock, huh? Yes, sir. You better believe it. Yep, sir. Plage in there. Almost all plage. She likes it. As a matter of fact, oh boy, I think we might have ourselves something close to an orthosite. Because it's crystalline in there. It's just a bunch of, just almost all plage. What a beaut. That is really a beauty. And there's another one down there. Yeah, we'll get some of these. Back it up.
Okay, now what you can't hear in that recording, the geologists in the back room at this point were just going bonkers.
Yeah, they were losing it.
Yeah, because they were like, woo, they found it.
Bring it home, you know.
I like that last comment. He goes, yeah, back it up.
Whenever I was watching it and just hearing him talk about it,
right.
It's crazy how much context means, because if you were to hear all of these same things, like a bunch of guys excited about a rock,
right?
You're like, all right, but they're on another, another orbiting body,
another world.
Yeah, it's like then they find this rock and they're like, woo, like it's funny how something that simple in a different context is a huge discovery.
Well, you haven't seen the HBO miniseries From the Earth to the Moon, right? Okay. They have the actor that's playing, I believe, Dave Scott, makes the comment, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he says something to the effect of, all my life I wanted to be a test pilot and fly planes. And now the most significant thing I will have done, and I think he said the achievement that he was most proud of was he found that rock.
Yeah, and anyone else can say, "Oh, I found a rock," and you're like, "Oh, I found a rock on the moon."
Right.
Oh,
yeah. Now, the documentary you watched, did they do the hammer and the feather?
Yeah, they showed that.
Okay, talk about that.
Okay, so I like the introduction to it. Like, they set up a camera, and they'd actually, I think they said they'd done this experiment before, but they had.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought, okay.
Yeah, they
gave it a test run,
or done an experiments like yeah, and they wanted to.
We want to make sure this is right.
This one was documented more than the previous space missions had, so like the public are seeing a lot of things. And anytime we've sent anyone up to the ISS, like whenever we first had the ISS. They would show things like, oh, this is what water does, or this is what we eat. Just little things like that, because it just gets your attention. And so you see him standing in front of the rover, the camera being held, or not the rover, but the lander.
Right.
And he's like, well, there was once this guy named Galileo, and he starts to tell you about gravity and if the feather and a hammer are dropped without with just gravity being the only factor, they'll fall at the same speed.
Yeah, and they'll hit the ground at the same time.
Yeah, and they'll hit the ground at the same time. It's just, air resistance and, atmosphere that change those things. And so he said, so we're going to test it out. And, he just lets go of both, and they fall at the same speed and hit at the same time.
Well, in my left hand, I have a feather. In my right hand, a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago, who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. The feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather for our falcon. And I'll drop the two of them here, and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? Bob, It proves that Mr. Galileo was correct in his findings.
Okay, so they had their famous demonstration of science right there on the moon, and at that point, they were supposed to pack up and go home.
Yeah.
But there was something very personal that they wanted to attend to. Houston had asked Commander Dave Scott to drive the rover by himself over to a small hill that was about 300 feet away. And the reasoning was there was an attached video camera on the back of the rover. They wanted to get video footage of the limb actually leaving the lunar surface.
I'm driving, Joe. Sorry about that.
Okay, fine. A couple of requests when you get there. We'd like for you to report on possible dust condition on the battery mirrors. And we'd also like for you to tap the amp-hour meters just to see if the readings change.
Joe, wait. Joe, stand by. Break. Hey, Joe, wait till I get there, will you please? I got to concentrate on driving right now.
Rush.
And at this point, the camera on the rover had been shut off because it was overheating, and Houston wanted to give it a chance to cool.
Dave, we'd like for you to align the high gain per the checklist procedures, but we're standing by for your readings on how possible you think that is because of the dim intensity of the Earth.
Unseen by Houston, Commander Dave Scott parked the rover. He put a small red Bible on the instrument panel of the rover.
Dave, do you read Houston?
Then he walked about 20 feet away, where he found a small depression in the ground, and there he placed a plaque.
Hadley Base, do you read Houston?
And on the plaque, in alphabetical order, were 14 names, and these were people that had lost their lives in the space program, and that included 3 cosmonauts from Soyuz 11.
Yeah.
He also placed a small aluminum figure, which was representative of a fallen astronaut.
Hadley Base, do you read Houston?
As you can hear, Houston didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah, now bye-bye, Joe.
Okay.
The figure, it's a very, like... It's
They
just,
commissioned an artist and everything for that.
yeah, it was just this metal figure, and it kind of just looks like a generic human form, you know? It didn't look like the spacesuit or anything.
Right.
You know, it was just the form of a human.
Right.
And
Bipedal human.
Yeah, and then there was this plaque, and, you know, with the moon, it's not going to go anywhere, you know, and like weather's not going to cover it up. It's kind of like wasn't there an astronaut that wrote his initials in the dirt?
Yeah, he wrote his
daughter's initials.
His daughter's, yeah.
Yeah, and it's up there forever. You know? So like the plaque they just put on the ground, you know, and I think they stuck it into the soil so it was standing upright.
I'd have to do some looking to remember who, but somebody like left a picture, like a family photo or something.
Yeah.
In like a sleeve.
Uh-huh.
But all that stuff is up there.
Yeah.
All those footprints are there, undisturbed. All that equipment. You know, it's amazing to me to think that, you know, someday we're going to revisit those landing sites.
Yeah, and it's just we're going to see these, you know, dusty little things just sitting all over the place.
But anyway, 43 years ago this week, Apollo 15. Well, I guess that wraps it up for But I Digress, and so we move on now. There are some folks that we want to thank, as always. We do want to thank our listeners, number one, and that includes our regular contributors as well.
We want to thank the subreddit moderators,
Kerbal Space Program, and also Kerbal Academy. They have a link to us on their front page.
And all the music you heard is by Professor Soap. You can find him at facebook.com/Professor Soap.
And don't forget, if you would like to get in contact with us, we do have an email address,
kerbalpodcast@gmail.com.
And you can get us on Twitter,
@Kerbalcast.
I am your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot, Biff Aldrin, and our CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Until next time,
happy Kerbaling! Engineer.
I have a letter here that references... We read your letter. We read your letter.
That could be in every outtake. It's time to hear the report from the crew.
What is your favorite color?
Now I'm completely out of money and no one will ever work with me again.
Not so pathetic.
Honey.
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 Honey, I miss you.
Honey, honey.
They landed. I have no idea when they landed. They entered orbit around... No. And then they returned on August the 2nd. No, that's not right. I'm tying myself up in all these dates.
And Thanks, Doc. And then the door closed.
I feel so much better.
A day in the life of a Kerbal psychologist.
Okay.
It is episode 13.
It is episode 13.
Oh, that's unlucky.
It's unlucky. Oh. No, it's just a number. Dadgummit.